there is this expectation that androgens are bad for women, even though they are inherent to their physiology. We have to have them, and not just for our reproductive function, but for our brain health, our neurological health, our bone health. So they have an incredibly important role in our physiology. With anything though, if we have really low levels on one side or really, really high levels, there's going to be potential implications for that.
Speaking of athlete health, so much of the conversation that I've seen specifically around the enhanced games has really been around athlete safety without any nuance or consideration for men versus women. So I was hoping we could talk a little bit now about some of the short-term and long-term effects that female athletes will have from using performance-enhancing drugs. Because again, I think for the layman, you hear about PEDs, you think big muscles, hypertrophy, it's all those kind of the maleness of the performance-enhancing drugs. What are some of the key factors or symptoms or problems that women can have from sustained performance-enhancing drug use?
So number one is what are we talking about when we say performance-enhancing drug? That is a very ambiguous term in my land because there are so many underlying kind of substances that are in that umbrella. If we look at specifically how an organization like the World Anti-Doping Organization defines them, they break them down into specific categories from stimulants to anabolic or muscle building agents to things to support and promote oxygen capacity. So there are many different drugs that fall underneath this umbrella of like PED. And some of those substances are used within medicine every single day. And so that's another important thing to remember. So I think what you're speaking though to is more to our pharmaceutical androgens.
I'm speaking about androgens specifically because of the knock-on effects because of female physiology is obviously very, very different. I think sorry, I should have been clearer in my questioning, but along those lines, because of how it can then cause a severe imbalance in the natural female hormone system.
As I sit here with like this disgusting sea of papers around my desk, we don't have a lot of data on this empirically. Okay, so number one is pharmaceutical androgens have been used in clinical settings and non-clinical settings since about the 1930s. That's really when we had that genesis of pharmaceutical androgens. Back then, women did get them prescribed for a host of different medical issues, whether it was for anemia, certain, like I said, muscle wasting disorders, but then also certain gynecological challenges, certain types of cancer. So they were being used broadly. And this is the dawn of a new era of medicine, right? It's the dawn of the endocrine era, really learning about the endocrine system and hormones and everything else. And so some of those doses were a little crazy, not gonna lie. By today's standards, you look at them and you're like, ooh, that poor human. But they were high for both men and women. They didn't know better. They were just creating these drugs. We didn't have randomized controlled trials. We didn't have the same pharmaceutical standards we have today. And so that kind of idea as to what these drugs could potentially do in a female really got exasperated because we kind of saw some dosing getting stretched. There was also, though, what's really important to remember is that androgens, estrogens, and progesterones collectively within both science to this day and historically have been called the sex hormones. And there's this idea that androgens are the male sex hormone and estrogens and progesterone to a lesser extent are the female sex hormones, and that they are sex exclusive. So men have one, women have the other. And when we create that idea, what that means is that if we think that androgens are the male sex hormone and they promote things that are associated with maleness, they are not okay in the female body. But that's not true. Women have androgens, and a lot of them naturally. We make estrogens from androgens. Our ovaries create them. So even ideas like, oh, well, estrogens and progesterones are the ovarian hormones. It's like, well, actually androgens are too. And just like the testes also create estrogens. So that idea, which, in my land, it's like pre-scientific ideas around these hormones, it was debunked right away. Researchers were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Women have androgens too, varying amounts of them. We were wrong, but it was too late. Names were already applied to it. What does that mean, though, when we start to have this conversation around how do pharmaceutical androgens impact women? Well, there is this expectation that androgens are bad for women, even though they are inherent to their physiology. We have to have them, and not just for our reproductive function, but for our brain health, our neurological health, our bone health. So they have an incredibly important role in our physiology. With anything though, if we have really low levels on one side or really, really high levels, there's going to be potential implications for that. So the pursuit of giving a female a pharmaceutical androgen often and historically has been to create a hyperandrogenic environment. So an environment within the body that is of high androgens, much higher than they would make on their own. Therefore, there's going to be potential implications for that. Now, it's going to vary individual to individual. There's not a one size fits all because it's a lot more complicated. We have to get into, receptor sensitivity and the balance of other biochemicals. So are they still making sufficient amounts of estrogens? Are they making progesterone? Are they still ovulating? What's their ovarian status? So, if we think of it in that more nuanced way, we can begin to go, okay, it's not one size fits all. These drugs aren't all evils. Androgens aren't unnatural to the female body, but that if we inflate levels to an extremely high, what we call super physiological range, there is a likely chance of there being some potential implications. And what these implications look like are going to vary individual to individual, depending on their reproductive status, their health status, their age of use, their duration of use, their dose, the type of compounds used. So there's a lot of different variables involved. Now, whether we're talking about endogenous or natural levels of androgens, or we're talking about exogenous and pharmaceutical levels of androgens, if we have extremely high levels that are not managed appropriately in a female body, there are potential repercussions for things like ovarian hormone development. So our ovaries are where we make a lot of our hormones and a lot of other biochemicals. But if we have this high level of testosterone, let's say, circulating in our bodies, it's going to impact our ovaries' ability to make that hormone and the other necessary ones. There can also be implications for things like our liver function. There can be implications for things like acne and hair loss and mental health and well-being. I mean, really, it's head to toe. There are so many different implications that can occur, whether we're talking about endogenous or exogenous androgens. So the big question that I always have for individuals right now, especially because I think female use, I can't say that this is anecdotal because we don't have research to support this, but I've been around the fitness industry a long time. I've been around the sport world a long time. And I can say that in my opinion, we are seeing this higher rate of use, especially within individuals that are younger. So younger women are going on certain types of pharmaceutical androgens for the intent that they're going to provide like muscle building and fat burning capacity. And it's just way more complicated than that. And there are potential long-term implications for that. At the end of the day, Joe, any steroid in abundance is not going to necessarily equate to good health.